At 2:35 p.m. local time, over the waters of the South China Sea, an American helicopter was conducting operations that had alarmed Beijing. The Chinese response was immediate. Their best attack helicopter took off to stop it. The Chinese pilot didn't imagine he was about to make a mistake that would compromise his career over the next 77 minutes of attempting to intimidate the world's most powerful navy, inadvertently teaching the Americans strategic information that Beijing would have wanted to keep secret. The Chinese Z-10 pilot had taken off from Xiamen 33 minutes earlier with clear orders: drive the Americans away. The U.S. Navy MH-60 Romeo, an extremely versatile multi-role helicopter, was tracking a Chinese Type 039 diesel submarine. The underwater unit had been submerged for 53 hours and desperately needed to recharge its batteries. Diesel submarines work like someone holding their breath underwater. Sooner or later they must surface, and when they do, America is watching. The radio crackled with a threatening message. Foreign military aircraft, you are entering Chinese territorial waters. Alter your course immediately. The Z-10 pilot banked sharply across the Romeo's nose at 500 meters. Problem: they were 50 nautical miles from any Chinese territory in international airspace, where the United States had full right to operate. The Romeo's crew, 2 pilots and 1 sensor operator, didn't react at all. They knew something Beijing didn't. Over the next 77 minutes, while attempting to intimidate the U.S. Navy, China was about to make an incredibly serious mistake. The Romeo wasn't just observing. Those bulges on the fuselage are ALQ-210 electronic support measures pods, true digital vacuum cleaners that capture every electronic emission from the Z-10. Radar frequencies, communication protocols, engine harmonics. Everything was being meticulously cataloged. While the Chinese pilot believed he was being intimidating, his Z-10, essentially a cheap copy of the Apache built with Russian assistance from the 1990s when Moscow needed money and Beijing needed helicopters, was revealing all its secrets. It might appear threatening with its angular design, but appearances deceive. The Chinese pilot fired 2 flares around the Romeo. It wasn't an attack, but pure theater, the aviation equivalent of a chihuahua barking at a pit bull. The American response was eloquent. They pointed the dipping sonar directly at the submarine below. The message was crystal clear: we still see your friend down there. The submarine, understanding it was still being tracked despite the aerial interference, executed an emergency dive. The noise was devastating. Cavitation from the rapid dive, hull popping from pressure changes. Sensors across the entire carrier strike group picked it up. In submarine warfare, noise equals destruction. The Chinese pilot had just signed his own submarine's death warrant while trying to protect it, but he was about to discover something worse. At 2:53 p.m., after 23 minutes of failed intimidation, the Chinese pilot finally achieved something. His fire control radar locked onto the Romeo. The tone in his headset meant he could simulate an engagement. That satisfaction lasted exactly 3 seconds, the time it took the Americans to flip a switch. A nearby EA-18 Growler began bombarding the Z-10 with electromagnetic energy using ALQ-99 jamming pods. Suddenly, the Chinese pilot's radar went haywire. The target didn't simply disappear. The American helicopter appeared split into 12 different contacts. Some were flying backwards. Others seemed to be teleporting. One appeared inside his own cockpit. This is what happens when 1990s Russian technology meets modern American electronic warfare. The ALQ-99 doesn't simply jam radars. It makes them hallucinate. It's frequency agile, hopping across the electromagnetic spectrum faster than the Chinese radar can follow. Then something even more alarming appeared on the threat display. The U.S. carrier strike group had illuminated him with surveillance radars. FA-18 Super Hornets were already taking off from the carrier, not to engage. but to remind Beijing that the Romeo wasn't alone. It had the entire Pacific Fleet behind it. The Chinese pilot tried every solution, changing frequency, increasing power, even turning the radar off and on again. Nothing worked. The Romeo's electronic warfare suite operates simultaneously across multiple bands, creating what specialists call full spectrum dominance experience. The American crew remained so calm they were probably discussing lunch. The aircraft commander transmitted with the professionalism that comes only from absolute superiority. Chinese military aircraft. This is a United States Navy aircraft operating in international airspace in accordance with international law. We will maintain course and altitude. Translation: nice try, kid. Every second represented intelligence gold. Communication protocols revealed 2003 encryption. Radar frequencies showed they hadn't been updated since purchasing the Russian design. Even the rotor blade harmonics, useful for identifying Z-10S from 50 miles away just by sound, frustrated by complete electronic failure. The Chinese pilot closed to 500 meters. At this distance, he could see the American door gunner at the GU-2150 caliber, not pointed at him yet, but the message was clear. The Chinese pilot began aggressive maneuvers to force a defensive response. The Z-10 started lunging left and right, pitching up and down in sharp bursts. Each maneuver attempted to push the Romeo into an unfavorable firing position, but the tight turns reduced speed and brought the Z-10's airframe to the G limit. The Romeo, built on the proven Blackhawk airframe, can sustain significantly higher G loads while maintaining stable flight. The Chinese pilot was essentially exhausting himself while the Americans watched. Sensor warfare was completely one-sided. The Romeo's AR-47 missile warning system was tracking every aspect of the Z-10's movement. Maximum turn rate, 20 degrees per second. Climb performance, 12 meters per second. This data would later determine exactly how to program American missiles to intercept these helicopters. The Z-10 was providing its own defeat instructions. The Romeo's FLIR camera was recording everything in 1080p infrared. Every hot spot was being cataloged. Exhausts at 450 degrees Celsius. Transmission housing at 180 degrees Celsius. These thermal signatures would tell American engineers exactly where heat-seeking missiles should aim. The Chinese pilot attempted radar locks 14 times. Each attempt was a gift to American electronic warfare specialists. Romeo systems logged every frequency hop, every pulse pattern. When the pilot attempted laser designation with the electro-optical system, Romeo sensors didn't just detect it. They identified the exact model and software version. A single encounter had just compromised an entire generation of Chinese weapons. The stress was becoming visible. The Z-10's engines were running at 105% maximum continuous power, creating an infrared bloom 40% brighter than normal operations. The Romeo's FLIR documented this in exquisite detail. Every communication between the pilot and ground control was being intercepted. The frequency hopping pattern was predictable. American systems could now predict and jam Chinese military communications across the entire theater. The Z-10's performance degraded visibly. Hydraulic pressure dropping from overheating, transmission temperature in the red zone, flight controls becoming sluggish from overtaxed servos. The helicopter was literally defeating itself. At 3:47 p.m., the Chinese pilot watched the Romeo's dipping sonar touch the water again. The submarine was still being tracked. After 77 minutes, he hadn't moved the Americans an inch. His thumb hovered over the transmit button to report failure, but he decided ground control already knew. The American crew had accumulated 77 minutes of priceless intelligence. Electronic warfare systems knew exactly which frequencies to jam. Missiles knew exactly where to aim. Tactical computers knew exactly how to outmaneuver it. The message to China was clear: stick to cloning phones.